opened in 1904, operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It connects 5 boroughs with 470 stations. The New York Subway carries more than just passengers. So, let's find out what's lurking down there, and some of it is downright mysterious. Hidden beneath City Hall Park in Lower Manhattan is a subway station that's been untouched by passengers since 1945. It sits on a curve in the tracks, completely sealed off from the public and inaccessible through regular means. Whenever a 6 train reaches the end of its route and turns back north, it glides right past this forgotten station without stopping. Most riders have no idea it's even there. For the maintenance workers who get to access this hidden gem during designated work hours, it's one of the more intriguing jobs on the entire IRT system. They enter through service points that keep them away from the hustle and bustle of everyday riders. Inside, it's eerily quiet except for whatever sounds they bring along with them, and what echoes back from the station itself. Take one worker from the early 2000s, for example. He was doing an electrical inspection all by himself when he suddenly froze for almost a minute. Why? Well, he heard footsteps walking towards him. The sound was so clear that he honestly thought someone was walking down the platform toward him. But when he looked around, there was nobody there. The encounter sent chills through him. Feeling anxious, he finished the job. And when done, he could not get out of there quick enough. It's just one of those eerie moments that really makes you wonder what's going on in those empty spaces. Another story from around the same time came from a signal technician who noticed something strange while he was working at the curved end of the platform. It wasn't the usual rush of air you feel when a train approaches, but it was like he could sense the space around him gradually filling up. A mixture of a rush of air and unseen people filling the platform. He claimed it was the most bizarre sensation he had ever felt down there. What really makes these accounts interesting isn't any wild drama, it's how precisely each guy described what they felt. Once you start thinking about what really occupies that vacant space, it's hard to ignore, especially when you consider what Old City Hall was meant to be. On October 27, 1904, Old City Hall opened its doors and quickly became the crown jewel of New York's subway system. Stepping inside felt more like entering a grand cathedral than just a train station. It was the very first station on New York's inaugural subway line, designed to make a statement. Fast forward to 1945, the beautiful curved platform that once added so much charm had turned into a safety hazard as trains got longer. So, on the last day of the year, it quietly closed its doors for good. The subway moved on to new stations and upgrades while Old City Hall faded into history. Most would say it never really got the farewell it deserved. The Astor Place station, one of the original 28 stops of the IRT, is frequently identified as the most haunted station in the current system. The station is synonymous with the ghost train legend, which describes a luxury subway car that manifests late at night, pulling into the station without passengers before vanishing into the darkness toward the 14th Street Tunnel. The description of the spectral train provided by those who claim to have glimpsed it, or in rare cases actually boarded it, is remarkably consistent. The car is reported to feature mahogany paneling, silk draperies, leather couches, and even a functional wood-burning stove. These details correspond exactly to the private subway car of August Belmont Jr., the financier behind the Rapid Transit Subway Construction Company. Paranormal researchers and authors such as Tom Ogden have suggested that the sightings at Astor Place may be examples of retrocognition, or time slips. Because the fundamental structure and tracks of the Astor Place station have remained largely unchanged since 1904, the location may act as a temporal anchor. The persistence reflects a cultural memory of the subway as a site of elite luxury, a sharp contrast to the theories and gritty reality of the modern commuter experience. On the morning of September 11, 2001, the Cortlandt Street station on the IRT Lexington Avenue Line was wiped off the map when the World Trade Center came crashing down right above it. This left a chunk of the subway system buried under what became the biggest crime scene in American history. For years, that station didn't even exist. Trains that used to stop there just zipped through a gap in the tracks without slowing down, passing underground that holds memories of a loss still felt by the city today. The rebuild took way longer than anyone expected. Construction crews spent years digging through ground that kept revealing human remains mixed in with debris from the old structure. Each time they found something, work had to stop while they followed the necessary protocols. The workers described their experience as more than just a tough job. They talked about the vibe on site in ways that were hard to pin down. There was this strange stillness in certain parts of the excavation that felt different from the usual quiet you get when working underground. Several crew members, all working independently, mentioned feeling like the space around them was occupied in a way that wasn't factored into their construction timeline. Some workers even asked to be reassigned without going into detail about why, and those requests were quietly approved. It was clear that this project affected them on more than just a physical level. When the newly revamped station finally opened its doors in 2018, the buzz didn't just fade away, it transformed. People working late began sharing their experiences of the lower platform level, which seemed to carry a vibe that newer stations just don't have. There was a strange feeling in the air that many of them described. It wasn't scary or over the top, just something like a room that feels different after something important has happened inside. One night, a cleaner working the late shift at the station had a strange experience. Even though the place was unusually quiet and she was the only one there, she suddenly felt like she wasn't alone. It was a weird feeling that made her stop right in the middle of the platform. She looked around, scanning both ends of the platform, but saw absolutely nothing. After finishing her shift, she couldn't shake off that eerie sensation. The next morning, she casually brought it up, kind of like how people talk about odd things that they can't fully explain but still stick with them, and was amazed that others had had the same experience. A maintenance engineer was on the job, checking out the electrical fittings along the lower level. As he was moving along the platform wall, he suddenly heard a sound behind him. At first, he thought it was someone moving some kind of equipment further down the platform. Without giving it much thought, he turned to see what it was, only to discover the platform was empty. What really stuck with him afterward wasn't just that strange sound, but how ordinary it felt at that moment. It was the kind of noise you'd expect to hear in a bustling station, yet here he was in a place that was totally deserted. It's funny how sounds can feel so normal even when they're out of place. A train operator who used to run the late-night service shared his thoughts about passing through Cortlandt Street before the station reopened. During those years, trains would roll through that stretch at a slower speed, and he noticed something unique about it every single time, no matter what hour it was or how tired he felt. There was just this shift in the vibe inside the cab that he could never quite shake off. Today, the station looks clean and modern, fitting right in with today's transit hubs. But beneath all that lies a history that can never be forgotten. For the workers who keep things running smoothly, there are times when that connection to the past feels especially close. Not every account on the IRT is linked to a specific place. A lot of the more intriguing stories come from the dark stretches of tunnel that run between stations. These are the parts of the journey that passengers only know as a blur of blackness rushing past their windows before they reach the next stop. For train operators, these shadowy sections are just part of their daily grind. They manage them with routine checks, monitoring signals, and a focus that comes from years spent on the same route. However, it's when the train comes to a halt in one of these dimly lit spots, stopped at a red signal with nothing but the curve of the tunnel wall ahead, that you really start to feel what that space is all about. When a train is rolling down the tracks, the operator's focus is all about what's ahead. They're staring straight forward, keeping an eye on the rails, signals, and whatever's illuminated by the headlights. The cab of the train is pretty cramped and built for getting the job done, rather than for comfort. So, when the train is in motion, there's not much reason to think about anything else around them. An operator on the downtown 4 service recalled a time back in the mid-2000s when he had to stop at a red light in a tunnel just south of Grand Central. He thought it would be a regular 2 or 3 minute wait while traffic cleared up ahead. The cab was well lit, all the instruments were working fine, and outside was the typical dark of a tunnel, completely pitch black. What struck him first was how quiet it was. It wasn't that there was no sound at all. The ventilation system was humming away, and even when the train is standing still, there's always this low buzz in the background. But there was something different about this silence that caught his attention without him even trying. Later, he described this feeling not as fear, but more like an intense awareness he couldn't shake off. A kind of alertness that kicks in when your body senses something before your mind has fully registered it. Then, as soon as the signal turned green and the train started moving again, that strange sensation vanished completely. What's interesting about these kinds of accounts is that they share something in common. There is nothing over the top, no loud noises, and nothing that screams for attention. Instead, what you get is this persistent feeling reported by drivers on the same kind of train late at night. They all sensed that the space around a stopped train in the deep tunnels isn't always as empty as the schedule suggests it should be. Beneath the sprawling complex of the Grand Central Terminal lies Track 61, a site that occupies a unique space between official history and urban mythology. While not part of the public subway, Track 61 was constructed as a powerhouse and storage area for the New York Central Railroad. Its fame, however, is derived from its secret use by the executive branch of the United States government. Track 61 was famously utilized by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to travel unseen between the terminal and the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. The track accommodated a secret elevator designed to lift the presidential limousine directly into the hotel's garage, allowing Roosevelt to maintain the public illusion of mobility by hiding his paralysis from the press and the public. The train used for these journeys, known as US Number 1, was armored and featured cream-colored woodwork, effectively serving as the Air Force One of its day. The ghostly sightings associated with Track 61 are notably intimate. Maintenance and cleaning crews have reported seeing the spirit of a small Scottish terrier wandering the halls of the terminal and the tracks of the hidden station late at night. The dog is identified as Fala, Roosevelt's loyal companion, who accompanied him on nearly all his travels. Witness reports state that the dog appears to be searching for his master, often running towards solid walls or decommissioned doors before vanishing. The legend of Fala's ghost serves to humanize the history of Track 61, transforming a site of state secrecy into a poignant narrative of eternal loyalty. The most historically grounded hauntings in the New York transit system are associated with the Malbone Street wreck. On November 1, 1918, the deadliest accident in the history of the New York Subway occurred in a tunnel beneath Malbone Street in Brooklyn. This event provides a grim case study in how mass tragedy can leave a lasting imprint on the physical and psychological landscape of a neighborhood. The disaster was the result of a compounding series of failures. A strike by the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers against the Brooklyn Rapid Transit Company, BRT, forced the company to use inexperienced, non-striking personnel to operate trains. Edward Luciano, a crew dispatcher with no experience operating passenger trains, was placed at the controls of a 5-car wooden train. Luciano was already in a state of personal crisis, having buried his 3-year-old daughter, a victim of the Spanish flu, just 3 days prior, and was himself recovering from the illness. As the train approached a sharp S-curve leading into the Malbone Street Tunnel, it was traveling at approximately 30 to 40 miles per hour, nearly 5 times the speed limit of 6 miles per hour. The train derailed, and the wooden cars disintegrated against the concrete abutments of the tunnel. The impact was described as making matchwood of the cars, leading to the decapitation and impalement of scores of passengers. The horror was exacerbated when off-site monitors, misinterpreting the power failure as labor sabotage, restored electricity to the third rail, electrocuting survivors who were attempting to flee the wreckage. The trauma of the wreck was so acute that Malbone Street was renamed Empire Boulevard in an attempt to exorcise the disaster from the city's maps. However, the ghosts of the event are said to persist in the buildings above the tunnel. The structure that became the Brooklyn Central Office for the Fire Department in 1923 had been used as a makeshift morgue immediately following the crash. Workers in this building have reported shadowy figures and an oppressive atmosphere in the basement, believed to be the spirits of the 93 identified victims. Although some long-term employees report never having a direct encounter, the story remains a fundamental element of the building's identity, illustrating how physical spaces can become permanently associated with the memory of a tragedy. The New York subway system contains numerous ghost stations, platforms and stops that were once vital hubs but are now shuttered and decaying. These locations serve as physical manifestations of the system's contraction and expansion over time. The Worth Street station, located between Brooklyn Bridge and Canal Street, was closed in 1962 when improvements to the Brooklyn Bridge station made it redundant. Today, the station is a graffiti-covered platform visible to the 6 train riders. It is often described as having a particularly heavy or watchful atmosphere, a feeling that some attribute to its proximity to the African burial ground in Lower Manhattan. During the construction and expansion of the subway in the early 20th century, thousands of remains of enslaved and free black New Yorkers were potentially disturbed or built over. The reported ghosts of the Worth Street area are often interpreted not as specific individuals, but as a collective spectral presence representing the city's buried and unacknowledged history. The 18th Street station was decommissioned in 1948, characterized by stalactite-like pillars and lonely stairs that recede into the gloom. Similarly, the 91st Street station on the Upper West Side has been shut since 1959. These stations are frequent targets for urban explorers who report hearing phantom announcements or the sound of footsteps on platforms where no trains have stopped for over half a century. The visual experience of these stations, frozen in time, creates an environment that is naturally likely to make you aware of the supernatural. The Joralemon Street Tunnel, the first underwater connection between Manhattan and Brooklyn under the East River. It is a site of significant technological achievement and harrowing legends. The tunnel's construction in 1907 was marked by a legendary accident where compressed air blew a worker, named Dick Creedon, through the riverbed and out of the water. The tunnel has since become associated with reports of auditory hauntings that mirror the screaming tunnel legends of Niagara Falls. In the Joralemon Tunnel, workers and transit police have reported hearing 2 sets of footsteps where only one should exist, or the muffled screams of a woman. The most prominent legend involves a bride named Eleanor who vanished on her wedding night. Her white dress was allegedly found discarded on the tracks, still warm to the touch. These sightings often involve reflections in standing water within the tunnel. Witnesses report seeing a face looking back at them that is not their own, but rather a woman with her mouth opened impossibly wide in a silent scream. This doppelganger phenomenon, combined with the psychological pressure of being hundreds of feet beneath the riverbed, contributes to the tunnel's reputation as a site of profound dread. The sound of the trains themselves, transmitted through the riverbed, creates a constant, low-frequency vibration that some believe acts as a tone, inducing feelings of anxiety and paranoia in those who spend time in the tunnels. In the 21st century, the spooky stories of the subway have evolved to include behavioral anomalies that challenge the boundaries of rational urban experience. Digital forums have become repositories for eyewitness accounts that characterize the subway as a place where the social fabric frequently unravels. One modern account describes a rider who observed a relatively normal-looking dude begin to shave his arms with a battery-operated shaver, pausing only to lick the shaved hair off his arms and wash it down with water. Another report details a synchronized robbery where an entire car of people appeared to be in on it, crowding a victim until they realized their belongings were gone in what felt like a military operation. While these events are not paranormal in the traditional sense, they contribute to the subway's reputation as a nightmarish neighborhood where reality is unpredictable. One of the more chilling modern stories involves a late-night train in Brooklyn. A passenger felt safe because a fellow rider was calmly cross-stitching, a hobby that signaled harmlessness. This stood in contrast to another rider who was exposing himself to two teenage girls. However, as the harmless man stood up to exit, the passenger realized his cross-stitch pattern was a large swastika. This story illustrates the Twilight Zone quality of the modern subway, where the most unsettling horrors are not spectral trains or Victorian ghosts, but the realization of the malevolence that can hide behind a persona of normality. As the system continues to modernize, with projects like the 2nd Avenue Subway and the 7-line extension, new layers of history are being laid down over the old. Yet, the ghost stations and unmapped tunnels remain, serving as a reminder that the city's progress is always built upon the ruins of its previous ambitions. Whether it is the sound of moaning in the City Hall loop or the sightings of a Scottish terrier at Track 61, the supernatural lore of the subway ensures that the city never truly forgets the people and the dreams that were buried to build the world's greatest metropolis.